All right, so I'm live. I'm just seeing if anybody who is subscribed to my channel might be awake at this time, kind of figuring out what the hell I'm going to do that can have a chat with me because I'm in a state right now. I've had a couple of Bloody Marys with some vodka where my mind is going a million miles a minute and I don't have anybody to bounce my ideas off of. Um, that can be productive. Um, because I've heard of people who dabble in certain things like cannabis and shrooms and angel dust to sort of get in contact with a different plane of themselves. Which, if you're someone that has never done that before and has mental health issues or may have mental health issues that are not diagnosed, I do not suggest that because that can have an adverse reaction, um, especially with hallucinogens because you don't know how you're going to react to it. So I would do that if you're going to do, I would do it in a safe space with people that you trust, where you will not find a way to hurt yourself as far as being on a second story or near traffic because you don't know how you're going to react to those. But for me, sometimes I reach these planes in my head where I get to a different level of my existence and my thinking um, once I drink certain liquor sometimes. Um, Obviously, that's not all the time. And some people might think that I'm crazy because they're like, oh, well, alcohol, like, I can't do that. But it's kind of like if I find that fine line between um, being drunk and being sober. It's a very fine line, um, but it kind of does something where it helps reduce my anxiety and it drops my walls and it helps me connect with my inner self and my third eye. Um, like it's like I have a clean crown chakra, if that makes sense. Because it's sort of like my body might act under the influence of alcohol, but consciously I'm aware. Um, and it's like my conscience fights my body sometimes. Um, so which is it's sort of hard to explain. It would be kind of like if you were paralyzed and you had no control over your body, but mentally you were you were aware and awake of everything that was happening around you and the fact that you couldn't move your body. Now imagine that, but your body's moving and you can't really consciously control it. Um, and certain things with your speech and things that are floating around in your head might not come out correct, even though they seem correct to you. Um, it's quite a surreal experience. So that's why I'm saying, like, with alcohol, it's I guess it's sort of my thing sometimes to reach this plane of existence that is hard to reach when I'm sober, just with my anxiety and everything else. That I can kind of tap into, but it's harder to tap into m- my brain and to think about certain things. Without this, just because if you have anxiety and like depression and autism and things like that, you know how these things can affect you in a way to where you stumble over your words and your thoughts might not correlate with themselves, uh, which is why I've labeled myself as that person. that is either the happy drunk, the philosophical drunk, or the angry drunk. So basically, how it usually ends up when I drink is I'm always happy at first, and then I get into a state where I turn philosophical, but I don't get angry very easily. I only get angry in situations where I feel like someone is taking advantage of my current mental state, where they might do something sexually or what have you to me. So I go into defensive mode. So that goes angry, and also to it's harder to control your emotions. Um, but right now my head is it's clear, uh, even though I have been drinking. So that kind of affects my thought. It affects my physical um, actions with my body, not my mental. It's just because the alcohol, it slows down the connect from your brain to your body. So that's why you have a slower connection of why you shouldn't drive, because it messes with vertigo and that sort of thing, which I'm not driving. I haven't driven since I've been drinking earlier tonight. Um, but it helps me kind of get to that place where I was before I had my car accident. Um, 6 years ago, before I had the traumatic brain injury and the abusive relationship, that helped develop my anxiety because I was not allowed to talk in public, which it might sound weird. It's sort of a behavioral thing, because things like that can affect the chemistry in your brain, which I did talk about your brain in certain episodes. And the brain is a very interesting place. Yeah. So, but chemistry in your brain, chemicals, because that is what causes some mental illnesses. Um, you can have things that can affect the chemistry of your brain, such as social interactions, things that you watch, things that you read, things that you do, things that you eat. And those chemical things, they can really affect um, the workings of your brain and the proteins and the amino acids and the vitamins and the minerals and every other working thing of your brain. Um, because, you know, even before I got into that relationship, when I would go out, I would be a social butterfly and I didn't need to drink to, do that. And when I would drink, I would be that happy drunk. I'm an honest person. I feel like I'm an honest person. I don't have a filter. It would obviously be worse when I was drinking. Um, since I've had my brain injury from the accident and abusive relationship and the two concussions I've seen from my horses in that amount of time, the filter when I am sober has been worse. It is definitely worse when I am drinking alcohol. Um, and then having to deal with um, the the thing in my brain, trying to get my brain programmed back to being okay in group environments and dealing with new situations after that abusive relationship. It was very hard because I wasn't allowed to talk to people. Um, I literally was not allowed to talk. I wasn't specifically told not allowed to talk. Well, I was, but I was told to shut up, to be quiet. If I would say something, I would be told, "Oh, so what stupid thing are you gonna say? Or why don't you just shut the fuck up?" So before I would say anything, I would just like hang my head and I wouldn't say anything. And that's basically what my existence was for 6 months out of a year of that relationship. Whenever I was on public, I wouldn't say anything. Uh, It's it's really hard to think about, and I was also hit over the head every day with objects. So it wasn't like the typical physical abuse with fists and things like that where it left bruises. But I was hit in the head with things every day, very hard. Comcast remotes, canes, uh, pillows, things that wouldn't leave a mark, but it was still physical because there were actually a few times I can remember my brain would be so fuzzy that I would feel like I was drunk from being hit over the head so many times. And I remember, going back into our shared bedroom and sitting there and Googling, repeated head trauma, like, is this going to damage me? You know, so there are certain things and like, and I know how it is when you're extremely tired and you sort of start hallucinating things. I've never gotten to the point where I've seen like really off the wall things. I have hallucinated to the point where I've hallucinated that I've had, conversations with people, or like I have people calling my name, or I did this, or I did that. But I've never like hallucinated like these crazy things that people talk about. It's almost like an LSD trip. So that's why I wouldn't suggest some of like the hallucinogenic or the psychedelic drugs to anyone. I actually wouldn't suggest alcohol to anyone. I pretty much think everyone, even if they think that they're in remarkable physical and mental health, should see a therapist because there could be something that you experience, when you were a child that you could be um, blocking that you don't remember because the mind is a wonderful thing. It can block things. That's why, say you go through a trauma and you don't suffer a head injury, you can get amnesia and not remember anything from that event. You can remember before and a little bit after that whole event, you might not remember it because that's your brain's coping mechanism. It can go in and be like, we don't want to remember this. We don't need this. We're not going to remember this. So that's why you get that traumatic amnesia from that, which is why, kind of piggybacking on that video I did, our brain. It is an amazingly wonderful and horrible thing. Horrible thing because we don't know exactly what it can do. Um, and I think the whole thing is we don't use 10% of our brains, is we only understand about 10% of what it does. I mean, you know, because that's just like doctors. Um, that's why there's different, that's why there's dead and then there's brain dead. Um, because your brain could still be working, but your body won't be working, like your heart and your lungs. Like you could have a machine that will breathe for you, pump your blood, people feeding you through a feeding tube, but your brain will still work, but for some reason your body won't work. Um, and it seems like a disconnect. Like your brain controls everything with your body, but at the same time, your brain and your body will fight. They will fight each other, which goes back to sayings, you have your heart that you decide with or your brain. Um, like when you go into hypothermia, um, your brain will tell your body, okay, stop, you know, stop pumping blood into the extremities and just do it into the torso. Your heart, it's like, well, I need to pump blood all the way through. So, so you might have some things going on with your heart, with your brain as far as how your blood is pumped. Because believe it or not, the thing that pumps your heart, even though it's a muscle, it actually has its own electrical current. And that's what controls your heart. That's why when people go into different heart rhythms like AFib and VFib, um, that's why the AEDs shock the heart, and that's why you have to be clear, is because that electrical shock, it can correct that electrical shock of the heart that controls the beats to get it back to normal. And that's also why if somebody shocks someone who has a heart malfunction with the electrical circuit in your heart, is you need to stand clear because if your heart is working normally and you get that electrical current, it will fuck up your heart and you will die instantly. Which is also why electrical currents will kill you with the it's not the voltage that will kill you, it's the amps. Because the amps disrupt the electrical current in your heart and your heart will stop. That is why your heart is important. Because how your heart works on the back is you have a top part up here and a bottom part down here, which, if you know anything about science and magnetic north and south poles and how electrical currents work, this up here is a different pole than this down here. And then there's a current that flows through each thing that makes your heart contract. It makes it go and then and then and then and then and then so you get the blood flowing through and the valves because you have different valves that do different things. I'm trying to remember. So you have your vein that comes down here that takes the blood to the heart and it pumps it into another valve, and then if it's a vein coming to the heart, it's that oxygenated rich blood, and then it goes from that valve into an artery valve that gets spread out to the body, and then the other vein comes back up into here, which is the blood that has already had the oxygen taken out of it. It kind of goes like, and then it goes into the other valve, and then it gets sent away from the heart. Which I might be wrong on that, but your heart has 4 valves, 2 are vein valves and 2 are artery valves, if that makes sense. I think. I'm not sure. I did EMT class. But the human body is an amazing thing. Like I said before in my last video and a bunch of other ones, that energy is different things. We have different energies working in our body right now. Me talking is an energy. My brain going is an energy. Like I have a bunch of different energies going in my brain just for me to talk and moving my hand. Me moving my hand is an energy. My thyroid working is an energy. My lungs working is an energy. My blood flowing from my lungs to my heart, going to my extremities, is an energy. The Bloody Mary that I'm drinking, going through my mouth into my stomach to be absorbed and then moved through my duodenum to towards the small intestine and be worked through that, and then to the large intestine to be worked out. That's completely different energies. And even when it goes through the stomach, as it's sitting in your stomach right here, and it's kind of grinding and trying to take out what it can, like that stuff, it goes over to my liver, it goes to my pancreas, and you can't forget about your kidneys. Your kidneys work. Your kidneys are your biggest filtration system in your body. Like if you don't have your kidneys, you're dead. Because that's how you pee. Because it takes the cell waste from your veins and your arteries and stuff, and like your liver kind of like absorbs and tries to neutralize toxins. The same with your pancreas, which I'm doing it backwards, but I'm following the video. So your kidney kind of filters through a couple of different things. It does like the cellular, and then as you have stuff going through your intestines and it absorbs nutrients, there is a sort of liquid aspect that gets kind of taken from that, and it goes over to your kidneys, and then your kidneys have this teeny tiny tube that goes from them down into your bladder, which for women, well, men too, women, it sits right here, and then your uterus actually kind of comes up behind it and then sits over it. That's why when you're pregnant, you have to pee all the time, because your uterus like kind of expands up in that top part and the baby pushes on the bladder. So if you're wondering, that's why you pee. And if you don't know, look up a diagram. If you look at a diagram from the side of a woman's body, you will see this is the side of the body. Here's the anus, and then the uterus that comes up and goes like this. So it goes up and then it hooks over, and then under the uterus is the vagina. And that top part of the uterus, that is the horn, is where the fallopian tubes, that's where the fallopian tubes connect to it, which is where most of the time the eggs implant somewhere in there. So as the uterus expands, it pushes down on the bladder, which causes the urinary incontinence in women. Which men, if you didn't know this stuff, you really need to watch a couple of biology videos. Because that's sad if you don't know this information. I've known this information since 6th grade. And also men too. I know there's non-binary and all the other cisgender people, but I'm going to do a later video on that. I'm still conducting research about how like not being cisgender affects your practice. But as I said before, I'm a science person, so I look at things like biology, not really like the idea we have of gender versus our biological sexual assignments at birth, if that makes sense. The sexual assignment at birth is different from perceived gender as far as male, female, non-binary, androgynous, things like that, because that's more of like a psychological level than a biological level. Because even though you could say, oh, I'm non-binary, like biologically, like you'll still have like the reproductive system of like a male or a female, which humans are animals, we will all have at birth. Like I have rabbits, I have horses, you know, they're male or female. Which to me, male or female is more of like the biological term. It's not the gender term. For me, I consider gender more like a masculine and feminine type thing. Because you could have a relationship with a hetero couple that includes a man and a woman, and you could have say the man would take what is considered the feminine role, say staying home with the kids, or like staying home with the kids, doing the cooking, doing the cleaning, doing the laundry, and then the woman takes on that masculine role of being the breadwinner and then does the more masculine stuff. So that is kind of where the difference is between biology assignment and gender assignment. And I've even heard some, I have the hiccups and I don't know why. I hate having the hiccups. And that's why even I've even had some people say, and like heard people say who are non-binary and different gender things, who will say biologically I am male, or I'm biologically I'm female, but my gender is this. So that's one thing we have to look at is biology versus psychology. I mean, and you have to say it, psychology, it's a perceived thing because humans are animals and other animals don't have perceived genderal, they don't have perceived genders. They just kind of do things that are based off of instinct, but different things are different, like penguins. You know, the females, they lay the eggs, and then the males, while the females are fishing, the males will sit and incubate the eggs. But once the females are back with the babies, after they're hatched, the males do their own thing, and then the women penguins are stuck with babies. So that's one thing we have to look at. And I'm not saying like gender thing as a psychology thing and saying that people are crazy. I'm just saying that as far as these classifications, it's a thing that humans came up with in our own mind. Just because I think that we tend to complicate things a little bit more than we need to. I mean, because honestly, if you look at the animal kingdom, I mean, does that badger care that this other badger is like a Christian or not? No, because that doesn't exist with them. It only exists with us. I believe our true role in this whole grand design. I hate hiccups. And this whole grand design thing is to be caretakers of the planet. Um, I mean, because people will say, like, well, we just need to get rid of humans. Well, no, we don't just need to get rid of humans because we have our own problems that we created that are fucking up the environment that we need to take care of. But there's also things that we can do to save species and animals that they can't do for themselves that we can do for them, like saving them from injuries, saving them from illness, rehabilitating them, and taking care of them. So that's why I think there's a fine balance with humans that we haven't found yet that we really do need to find without with or without spiritual guidance. We need to find that, which is why I also believe in a certain population control because we can't just keep populating the earth, and it's not just in the United States. Um, like we need to get birth control information and actual birth control methods, to like de- developing countries that need the stuff because they just keep having kids and then they like abandon them or put them up for adoption because they can't afford them. It's just a whole ongoing issue that I don't think that there's one simple answer to. Um, it's we need population control for ourselves because we tout population control for other animal species, but we don't talk about population control for ourselves. And if people do it either, and if people do, they either fit into one of these crazy categories where they're like, Nazis or crazy liberals or crazy religious fanatics. But I think we need to somehow come up with a population control for ourselves that works as a population as a whole for everywhere, not just the United States, every country. Because if who could go around giving every woman the depot shot in the world, then that would be good, and we could reevaluate population population, and countries can look at like everything in the country from drought, famine, like how much food they can grow to see like what the population they can which population they can sustain, and then how many people could have babies every year, and people could somehow obtain licenses or permits or whatever to do that. I don't know. But anyways, this is my drunk ramble. Love you guys. Bye. Oh,